also having, I need to talk to you about some homeopathic medicine. Inshallah.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to our second session of the day titled Qur'anic Wisdom and Discoveries of Our Time. My name is Saqib Ali, and I'm a member of the programming committee this year, and I'm honored to be co-moderators with Dr. Mujeeb, Malik, Saab, and Dr. Shanaz, as well as our chair people, Dr. Nasim Rehmatullah Saab, and Tahira, Siddiqua, Nasir Begum Saiba. This is my fourth year with this conference and my third year as part of the program committee, and I just wanted to quickly acknowledge the programming leadership with Dr. Fizan Abdullah, but especially Doctors Nusrat Sharif Saiba and Dr. Shanaz Butt, as well as Junaid Malik Saib. Again, this is my fourth year, and the program, by the grace of God, continues to improve every single year. And thank you for all of you for supporting our conference as well. As a quick reminder, this session is for 1.5 hours of continuing medical education. We will start this session with Dr. Nayyar Ahmed, an immunologist and microbiologist from Atlanta, Georgia, to begin our session with recitation of the Holy Quran.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان English translation, Surah Ar-Rahman, verses 1 to 14. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed in the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. It is God, the gracious, who has taught the Quran. He has created man. He has taught him plain speech. The sun and the moon run their courses according to a fixed reckoning. And the stemless plants and the trees humbly submit to his will. And the heaven he has raised high and set up a measure, that you may not transgress the measure. So weigh all things in justice and fall not short of the measure. And he has set the earth for his creatures. Therein are all kinds of fruit and palm trees with sheets, and grain with its husk and fragrant plants. Which then of the favors of your Lord will you twain deny, O men and jinn? Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah. Dr. Shanaz Butt is the moderator on the Lajna side. Dr. Shanaz, if you wouldn't mind introducing the next speaker, please.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. Welcome to our 13th Holy Quran and Science Symposium. I want to acknowledge our guests, special guests, Dr. Tahira Siddiqua Nasir Begum Sahiba and Sitara Baruj Akbar Sahiba. For those of you who don't know them, for those of you who missed yesterday's session, I urge you to get to know them better. This session, particularly, I am very pleased to be a moderator because when we were planning this session came about because we are celebrating 100 years of Dr. Abdus Salam's birthday. He was born January 29, 1926. And we thought it would be most appropriate for us to celebrate at this MSLM 26. So our very first speaker is Sabahat Rahman, and I'd like to introduce her and then tell you her topic, and that is how this whole session is going to be presented to you. Sabahat Rahman is a AUSA and AMAS member, as well as a Salam scholar. She's completed her bachelor's in biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins University and is currently working as a research assistant in the Karchin lab at Johns Hopkins. Sponsored by an NIH MSTP grant, she will begin training with Harvard MIT MD PhD program this June. We wish her all the best. Sabahat aspires to serve humanity as a physician-scientist, bridging compassionate clinical care with pioneering biomedical research. In her free time, Sabahat enjoys group workout classes, running, and reading. And today we welcome her to the podium, and she will speak about celebrating Dr. Abdus Salam's contributions to physics and to his faith.
Jazakallah, Dr. Shanaz, for that kind introduction. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallahu wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'd, fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear and respected MSLM guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am grateful and humbled to share a bit about Professor Abdus Salam today, celebrating his contributions to his academic field and to his spiritual community. In the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, "Thou seest not in the creation of the All-Merciful any imperfection. Return thy gaze. Seest thou any fissure? Then return thy gaze again and again. Thy gaze comes back to thee dazzled, aweary." Just 47 years ago, one man stood before the noble banquet audience in Stockholm, Sweden. Wearing a sherwani and pagri, he stated this very same verse of the Holy Quran. This man was none other than Dr. Abdus Salam, who then proceeded to tell his audience, Alfred Nobel stipulated that no distinction of race or color will determine who received of his generosity. On this occasion, let me say this to those whom God has given his bounty. Let us strive to provide equal opportunities to all so that they can engage in the creation of physics and science for the benefit of all mankind. A deep love for and study of the Holy Quran, combined with an earnest desire to provide educational resources for the underserved, permeated Dr. Abdus Salam's life. Born in 1926 in modern-day Pakistan, he showed academic prowess from an early age. He attended government college in Lahore and was awarded a scholarship to attend the University of Cambridge, where he studied mathematics and physics. Later, Dr. Salam pursued a PhD in theoretical physics at Cambridge, going on to become a professor of theoretical physics at Imperial College London. Around this time, he also founded the International Center for Theoretical Physics, an organization dedicated to exploring fundamental scientific questions and promoting engagement with scientists in developing countries. In 1979, Dr. Salam received the Nobel Prize in Physics, along with Drs. Sheldon Glashow and Steven Weinberg. This distinction, recognizing those few scientists who have made outstanding contributions to mankind, marked him as the first Pakistani and first Muslim scientist ever to receive a Nobel Prize. Crucially, the unity of Allah was at the heart of Dr. Abdus Salam's Nobel Prize-winning work. I am no physicist, but briefly and at a very, very high level, physicists generally identify four fundamental forces in the universe. These include electromagnetic forces, which describe how charged particles interact, weak nuclear forces, responsible for radioactive decay, strong nuclear forces, which hold atomic nuclei together, and gravitational forces, acting on any two objects with mass or energy. However, a central aim in theoretical physics is to unite these four forces. Even to secular physicists, it makes sense that there should be one underlying theory to explain how the universe operates. For a Muslim physicist like Dr. Abdus Salam, the conviction was unshakable. Dr. Salam, along with Drs. Glashow and Weinberg, demonstrated that the electromagnetic and weak nuclear forces could in fact be combined into one representative force. Deemed electroweak theory, this principle is a beautiful illustration of the Tawheed visible in Allah's creation. Today, we must derive inspiration from Dr. Salam's groundbreaking work. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, Ayatollah Talib bin Nasir Aziz, in his 2019 address at the UK Ahmadiyya Muslim Research Association conference, stated, "It was Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmed's Rahmatullah ardent desire that at least 100 Ahmadi Muslims would soon follow in the footsteps of Dr. Abdus Salam and become eminent scientists by the time the Ahmadiyya Muslim community entered the 2nd century. You must all consider it your mission to pursue excellence within your chosen field." Ahmadi Muslim researchers, especially those who pursue the sciences, should not only have the intention of enhancing the understanding of their chosen field, but should also maintain an everlasting resolve to find proofs of the existence of God. As I have said, this was how Dr. Abdus Salam Sahib conducted his work, and he obtained phenomenal success as a result. Our beloved Khalifa's words are a call to action. For all of us in the sciences, we must study the Holy Quran and reflect upon the deeper meanings of its verses. We must humbly strive to not only simply achieve worldly milestones, like prestigious publications and awards, but to ultimately serve humanity with our findings and prove the oneness of Allah. Respected Hazrat Abba Tahira Sahiba said something in her Q&A session yesterday, which perfectly summarizes the true spirit I humbly pray we adopt. There is no limit, she told us. Indeed, we have a duty and a responsibility as Ahmadi Muslims, and we cannot settle for anything less than true excellence. May Allah Almighty enable us to follow the guidance of our beloved Khalifa in all of our pursuits, and may we draw inspiration from the beautiful example of Dr. Abdus Salam. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Our next speaker will be speaker number 205. I'd like to welcome Dr. Ahsan Shah from Florida to the stage. His speech is titled The Red Blood Cell, From Physiology to Pathologic States. Dr. Shah is a hematology oncology specialist at the Florida Cancer Specialists and Research Institute in Lee County, Florida. He completed his internal medicine residency at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine and later pursued a fellowship in hematology oncology at Moffitt Cancer Center through the University of South Florida. Dr. Shah has a strong, he's right there. Dr. Shah has a strong background in research and has contributed to significant publications in esteemed journals and presented his findings at international conferences. Dr. Shah.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's an absolute honor and a distinct pleasure of mine to be one of the presenters at the MSLM 2026. I will start my presentation. Let me see how this works. With two verses of Holy Quran. O ye who believe, wine and the game of hazard and idols and divining arrows are only an abomination of the Satan's handiwork. So shun each one of them that you may prosper. Chapter 5, verse 91. And the second verse is, and when I am ill, it is he who restores me to health. Chapter 6, verse 81. The second verse is also a prayer prescribed by our beloved Hazur for all Ahmadi physicians and healthcare workers to recite before we see patients. The topic of my presentation is broad, but I'm going to try to keep it as concise as I can. So red blood cells are the most abundant cell in the human body. They primarily function to transport oxygen from the lungs to tissue and return carbon dioxide. Any small disruptions in the red blood cell function can have significant effect on overall physiology. So if you look at these cells under a microscope, they appear to be biconcaved. And they're packed with a protein called hemoglobin, which transports oxygen. It's important to note that they lack nucleus, which limits their ability to regenerate. And therefore, they have a relatively small half-life of about 90 to 120 days before they are removed by the spleen and liver. It's important to look at anemia not as a disease, but more like a symptom, okay? It's important to figure out what's the underlying cause of the anemia. It's a fairly common disorder, or I should say condition, which affects 5 to 10% of the population in USA. And if you look at third world countries, I would say that the prevalence is even higher. It's common among women of reproductive age, pregnant women, older adults, and a very common finding in outpatient and inpatient settings. Anemia workup really starts with a good clinical history taking. So if you see a patient, talk to them, most likely they will give you their diagnosis. I'll give you a small example. Let's say you see an 18-year-old female in your clinic. She is from California, she's a vegan, and she's having heavy menses. I mean, I think your diagnosis is made at that point. This is likely iron deficiency anemia in the setting of heavy menses and dietary restrictions. Other workup that is important to do, obviously you start with the CBC, retic count, iron panel, CMP, and peripheral smear, which is one of the things that a hematologist does and looks at. So an easy way to classify anemia is to basically look at the size of the red blood cells. We call this mean corpuscular volume, or MCV. So microcytic anemia are cells that are less than 80 FL, which is femtoliter. Normocytic anemia is 80 to 100, and then anything above 100 is considered macrocytic anemia. So this is a very watered down list of some common anemias that fall under each category. What's in bold is what I will very briefly touch upon. Iron deficiency I've already done. So under microcytic anemia, hemoglobinopathy, which what thalassemia falls under, is one of the conditions that I will very briefly touch upon. And then chronic kidney disease, and then in macrocytic variety, I'll touch upon MDS, which is my interest as a malignant hematologist, oncologist, and alcohol abuse, just to wrap up what I started my presentation with. So hemoglobinopathies are genetic disorders. It affects hemoglobin, that the oxygen-carrying protein in the red blood cells. Once again, if you gather a patient's history, you will likely get the diagnosis. So it's usually presents early on, 6-year-old, even younger patient who has anemia. And then when you're gathering the information, their history, they will tell you that they have multiple family members that also exhibit anemia. So you're looking at a genetic linkage here, obviously. So let's talk about very briefly the major type of hemoglobinopathies. Sickle cell disease, which is caused by a mutation in beta globulin gene by a single amino acid mutation. So the glutamic acid is swapped with valine, which leads to abnormal cells. These cells are sickled. They're not very efficient in going through the blood vessels. They are fragile and causes anemia. Likewise, thalassemias, there are two varieties, alpha thalassemia and beta thalassemia. Both are hereditary. And once again, there's an imbalance in a globulin formation, which causes these cells to be fragile with short half-life. And obviously, patients exhibit anemias. So typical treatment approach for these hemoglobinopathies has always been supportive care. So if a patient is anemic and requiring blood transfusion, obviously you'll just manage the symptoms by giving them blood transfusions. In sickle cell disease, we widely use hydroxyurea, which increases the fetal hemoglobin, which decreases the risks of sickling. And then there are some curative approaches such as stem cell transplantation and something very exciting, which is gene therapy, using the CRISPR-R editing. So right now, as we speak, there are 3 drugs or 3 products that are FDA approved. These are all gene editing treatments in which you basically mobilize patient stem cells, you collect them through a process called apheresis, you edit them in vitro, you expand the stem cells, and then you give these patients myeloablative chemotherapy, and then these engineered stem cells are infused back into the patient, and basically you're decreasing the disease burden, and now they're not requiring blood transfusions. In normocytic anemia, I'll very briefly touch upon a very, very common anemia that we see. It's called anemia of chronic kidney disease. This is a daunting diagram, but I'll just have you focus on erythropoietin, the master regulator. It's a hormone that is secreted by the kidneys once the body senses hypoxia, and then stimulates the bone marrow to do hematopoiesis. So if patients who have chronic kidney disease, they lack the ability to regulate this, and obviously they exhibit normocytic anemia. The way we treat these patients is basically, our goal is to keep their hemoglobin above 10. So we give them an exogenous hormone called erythropoietin. It comes in a form of either Retacrit or Procrit, and our goal is not to take them all the way to the normal range, but make them function enough and have the hemoglobin around 10, okay? So let's quickly talk about myelodysplastic syndrome, which is my interest as well. So it's a group of cancer where immature cells in the bone marrow fail to mature into healthy functioning cells. It's a very heterogeneous disease. So whenever you're looking at an MDS patient, there are a few questions that you ask, okay? One, how old is the patient? And how symptomatic are they, okay? And what are the cell lines that are involved in their myelodysplastic syndrome? So here's the whole set of classification, which I certainly do not have the time to go through, but what I will point upon is there is a scoring system that we use. It's called a Revised International Prognostic Scoring System. And basically, we can use that scoring system to look at their overall survivability. So very low-risk patients can live up to 10 years, a decade, which is good enough, right? You can just support them, sometimes just watch them. Whereas very high-risk disease, you're talking about less than a year of life expectancy. So a completely different outcome and a very aggressive disease. And the way we treat very high-risk MDS is actually bone marrow transplantation, okay? So I always have this running joke that, you know, whenever somebody tells you that, hey, I have a patient with MDS, it's just like, you know, your friend coming down and telling like your best friend was attacked by a feline, and you know, the hematologist in me would say, what kind of feline? Are we talking about a house cat or are we talking about a tiger, right? Because the outcomes are completely different. So low-risk disease, patients live good a decade, whereas high-risk disease, you're talking about they're teetering right on the verge of transforming to leukemia. They need chemotherapy, they need transplantation if they're transplant eligible. So I talked about erythrocyte stimulating agent, which is erythropoietin. There's a relatively new drug in the market. It's called luspatercept, which is the first-in-class erythrocyte maturating agent. So if you look at the diagram, oops, I'm sorry. So if you look at the diagram on my left, which is, I guess, your guy's left, this is a screenshot of what a steady state hematopoiesis looks like. So you have immature cells. Oops. So you have immature stem cells that over time mature and then become functional red blood cells. In myelodysplastic syndrome, through these mutations, you have a lot of premature cells that never mature. They occupy the bone marrow. Therefore, the patients become anemic. So this medication called luspatercept basically pushes these cells into maturity, okay? So last but not least, I started my presentation with a verse of Holy Quran in which Allah Ta'ala describes alcohol as an abomination and work of Satan. So mashallah, we have multiple specialists present in this conference, and they can attest to that they have seen complications from alcohol use. Let it be a gastroenterologist who will talk about acute pancreatitis, orthopedic surgeon who have seen trauma or even avascular necrosis. In hematology, alcohol does the same. So I see patients in my practice who will present with profound pancytopenia. And as we're having a very frank conversation with them, I'll try to dig deep into their social history, and I'll ask them about, you know, how much do you drink? And they will say, I drink socially. And then you dig deeper. I mean, these are retirees. They're socializing every night. They're drinking 3 to 5 drinks every single night. So I, you know, tell my patients to break the ice that it's important to be honest to your doctor and your priest. You know, I'm not taking any confessions here, but, you know, you telling me will help me kind of work you up further. Because if this is alcohol-related myelosuppression, I basically give them a month to recover, tell them to just wean off the alcohol, don't go into alcohol withdrawal, just step down, and then in 5 to 6 weeks, I'll repeat your CBC and see where things are at. If the counts do not recover, then that calls for a bone marrow biopsy so we can rule out other symptoms such as myelodysplastic syndrome. I think that's the end of my presentation.
Jazakallah. Dr. Shanaz, if you can introduce our next speaker, please.
Yes, thank you. As I said, I'm very honored to be a moderator here today because I had the honor to introduce a budding scientist, and now I'm going to introduce an established scientist. So please, we welcome Dr. Nusrat. She's going to be our next speaker. She's a PhD scientist with over 16 years of experience in drug discovery and preclinical development in good pharma companies such as Pfizer, Bristol Myers, and AbbVie. She currently works as a principal scientist 2 at AbbVie in rheumatology. Her expertise spans immunology, inflammation, and translational science with a strong focus on autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. Dr. Nusrat earned her PhD in molecular immunology from City University of New York, and her postdoctoral fellowship was from Hospital for Special Surgery and Weill Medical College of Cornell University in New York. Dr. Nusrat has led preclinical drug discovery programs in immunology from early discovery through clinical development and brings additional experience in fibrosis and anti-fibrotic therapeutic strategies. As a scientific leader, she is known for building and mentoring high-performance teams, managing external partnerships and contract research collaborations, and delivering milestone-driven results. Dr. Nusrat serves as the president of the Ahmadiyya Women Scientists Association of USA. She comes to us from the Boston Jamaat, and as most of you know, she is chairing the MSLM 26 conference. So we bring her to the stage and welcome her, and her topic is T regulatory cells as peacemakers of immune balance. Dr. Nusrat Sharif.
Jazakallah, Dr. Shanaz, for the very kind introduction. Auzubillahi minash shaitani rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear respected chairs of the 13th Annual Quran and Science Symposium, respected guests, and the attendees of the MSLM 26 conference as a whole, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The topic of my presentation today is regulatory T cells as peacemakers of immune balance. The beautiful recitation of the Surah Ar-Rahman that we heard at the start of this session, verses 7 to 9, draw our attention to the principle of mizan or balance. These verses highlight that the universe operates according to the laws established by Almighty Allah, from the vast celestial bodies in the heavens to the smallest plants growing upon the earth. All creation performs its allotted function with remarkable regularity and precision. The solar system and the components of the universe work together in perfect harmony. And this harmony depends upon balance. And even the slightest disturbance of this harmony or deviation from the order established by Allah could disrupt the equilibrium of the entire system. The Holy Quran draws our attention to the profound principle here. It is a universal principle. The stability and flourishing of a creation are sustained through balance, order, and regulation. And this draws our attention to this very biological principle existing in the science of the immune system. It's the same equilibrium that the immune system is operating and needs to be balanced at all times. It is a delicate equilibrium, strong enough to defend against infection, yet restrained enough to prevent damage to cell. And that opens the topic of T regulatory cells and their role in maintaining this balance. So here is what we can relate about the immune system to the verses that we just recited. And as I was reflecting on these verses, it's amazing how the guidance from the Holy Quran about reflecting on the particular verses that drive scientific inquiry is well illustrated in the biology of the immune system. And basically, 3 points emerge from this, which is that the creation is governed by the universal phenomena of balance. And if there is a deviation from this balance, even the immune system that is operating has this balance and can be distorted and can lead to adverse circumstances. And I'll go more into the depth of what happens when an immune response gets dysregulated. And the key or the central mediators of this balance are the T regulatory cells. When we look into the history of the regulatory cells, we can just trace back to the mechanism of the immune system. So under normal conditions, when we are in homeostasis, there are two arms of the immune system, the T effector cells, which are the conventional T cells, and they maintain whenever there is an attack on the body or the body gets a pathogen, they defend the body and by mounting an immune response. And once the virus or the pathogen is destroyed, then the immune response tapers down. But there are special cells that are responsible for tapering of this response. And so on the left side of the slide, what you see is homeostasis. Both of those arms are balanced. But sometimes the immune response that is triggered continues to prevail, and it doesn't taper down. And this happens under disease scenario. And this disease scenario is usually the inflammatory or autoimmunity, and you see the dysregulated arm. The cells that are dysregulated are the T regulatory cells. So there is a defect in them. They cannot bring the resolution back to homeostasis. And this slide actually gives a historical perspective. And the reason I'm bringing this up is one of the reasons of presenting this topic was when Dr. Shanaz asked me that this time the Nobel Prize was for medicine or physiology was for the three scientists who discovered the T regulatory cells and their function. And that's the reason why this discovery perspective is very interesting. And as you can see from this slide, the concept of suppression was there for the immune system. And scientists were thinking about this, that if this system is once activated, what causes it to taper down, right? And so that it's not attacking the own self antigens continuously. So in 1970s, there was this hypothesis of T suppressor arm existing. There's some cells present in the body. But then they could not find a definitive lineage of these cells or definitive markers, and so that hypothesis just died down. And people thought that it was even controversial to think about it. And in 1995, it was Shimon Sakaguchi who found that when he took out these cells out of the mice, took out the T cells from the mice, then they developed strong autoimmunity. And that was the time when these regulatory T cells were discovered, and then their subsequent establishment of function changed the paradigm of modern immunology from just being a phase of immune activation to more a phase of immune regulation. And here is illustrated a brief timeline. I wouldn't say as brief that is shown in the slide, but it has been through a couple of decades when this concept was rationalized. And as early as the 2000s, there was 1970s, there was a concept of the T regulatory cells, but not well defined. And eventually in 1995, the discovery came into limelight, and it was considered a breakthrough. And the reason why it was considered a breakthrough was because of two reasons. At the same time, there was two other scientists that were working. One was Fred Ramsdell, and the other was Mary Branco. And they were working on establishing the lineage of these cells to see if they were belonging to a characterization that could be defined for their function. And they discovered FOXP3. And one thing I would like the audience to go as a key takeaway is when you talk of suppression of immune response, it is the T regulatory cells and the FOXP3. That defines their function. It's the master regulator, and it's called the Khokhar transcription factor 3. And these scientists discovered that the same gene of FOXP3 tracked both in mice as well as in human. And because of these core scientific discoveries, the impact was huge. And you know, the impact was phenomenal. They changed the paradigm in immunology, and that paradigm was the immune balance and self-tolerance. And this is just some of the evidences that I mentioned, both from the mice as well as from the human. So in mice, the mutations in the FOXP3 gene will lead to chronic autoimmunity, and these are the scurfy mice. And in human, it leads to an IPEX syndrome, and this is chronic or systemic autoimmunity, and it's called as immune dysregulation and endocrinopathology and entropathy. So this is the concept of the Treg discovery. And just moving into the function of Tregs, I won't go into a lot of depth, is that they produce factors that will inhibit the T effector responses and does maintain the function. This is kind of a schematic that illustrates how they perform their balancing act. They inhibit the T effector cells and then release molecules that will continue to contribute to homeostasis. And this is, again, the same thing that I mentioned about T activation and T cell regulation. The only caveat is when this arm is dysregulated, all these molecular mechanisms get reflected in clinically as a disease, which is autoimmunity. And the current field is trending towards making Treg modulated therapies, and that's the emerging therapies for autoimmune disease, because the reason is they will ensure durable response and durable efficacy in these patients. These were the scientists whose hard work and innovation paid off, and they were awarded the Nobel Prize. And you see how they fall into the perspective of the discovery and the milestones. So I would like to close my talk with a very powerful closing reflection. And this is about not just the discovery of T regulatory cells, but the whole concept here is reading the verses of the Holy Quran and thinking about scientific inquiries if you're a scientist, right? And there could be a broad connection on what the Holy Quran is pointing us towards. And if we analyze that with an innovative mindset, we may uncover truths that could help us to uncover further biological paradigms of life. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Dr. Nusrat. We learned quite a bit about blood. I feel like I need a CBC after this session. Our next speaker is Muzafar Ibrahim Sahab. He will be talking, his talk is titled From Atoms to Medicine, the Role of Nuclear Physics in Oncology. My apologies. Muzafar Ibrahim Sahab is a Salam Fellow and PhD candidate in physics at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, specializing in experimental nuclear physics. Originally from Ghana, he commenced his doctoral studies in 2023, following the completion of his bachelor's degree in physics. His research focuses on investigating the structure of atomic nuclei, the foundational components of matter, with the objective of advancing fundamental scientific understanding and contributing to the broader field of nuclear science. His scholarly interests extend to the intersection of nuclear physics and medicine, particularly within radiation oncology, where he aims to support the development of innovative technologies and methods that enhance cancer diagnosis and treatment. He currently serves as the Nazim Dalim for the Boston Majlis. Outside of his research, he enjoys reading and participating in discussions on science, faith, and education.
Assalamu alaikum. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I'd like to thank the organizers of MSLM 26 for giving me the opportunity to present on this topic. So, first of all, when often people hear nuclear physics, the first thing that comes to mind is a bomb. But this talk, you join me in a journey where you realize that the applications of nuclear physics and atomic physics are so much life-saving as we imagined. As we can't imagine. So those who are in medicine and oncology for that matter, radiation science, the whole of radiation science comes from the atom and the nucleus. So to begin with, I'd like to introduce a basic structure of the atom. So the atom is composed of 3 particles: the electron, the proton, and the neutron. The electron is negatively charged, while the proton is positively charged, and the neutron has no charge. The neutron and the proton reside in the nucleus. And the interactions between these 3 particles are what produce all the radiations used in radiation science. And I use this verse because, thanks to Dr. Nusrat Sahiba for her presentation, the electrons are going around the nucleus like the planets are going around the sun. And there is a balance. And every particle in the universe wants to be in the ground state of rest. But in nuclear and atomic physics, we create imbalance and allow nature to take its course. So when you create an imbalance, you disrupt the nucleus of the atom. And that the atom wants to come into the ground state. It is this recreation of balance is what leads to the emission of radiations. And we utilize these radiations to diagnose diseases as well as cancer. So there are so many radiations that we can get, but a couple of them are listed here. We have the alpha rays, which are the heavier particles. Then we have the beta, which are like the electron. And then we have gamma and X-rays. Gamma and X-rays are both electromagnetic, but X-rays have low energy, and they are produced at the atomic scale. So we say they are in the keV range of energy. The gamma rays are produced in the interaction between the neutrons and the protons. So they are in the MeV energy range, so they have more energy than the X-rays. And then we have neutrons, of course, they come from the nucleus of the atom. Each of these radiation has its purpose. So to start with, let me look at the interactions at the atomic scale. So you have an electron, you excite the electron at high energy. You impinge it on a target. It can be any element, but mostly we use tungsten in diagnostic radiology. This electron beam impinges a target of a tungsten, disrupting the structure of tungsten, removing other electrons. And other electrons want to come out to the ground state. Doing that, they emit X-rays. And these X-rays are harnessed, and they are used to diagnose people for scans. And Alan Cormack and Hansfeld discovered that we could actually have a 3D scan using X-rays. And they won the Nobel Prize in 1970, and at the same time, Dr. Abdus Salam won his Nobel Prize. And they discovered that they could use X-rays, which give 2D image, to form 3D image. So this is still application of X-rays, but the production of X-rays is still fundamental physics. The second one, this is nuclear physics, diagnostics of cancer and other diseases in nuclear physics. So we use something called the MRI. The MRI originally is NMR, which is nuclear magnetic resonance. The human body is composed of water, which is 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen. And hydrogen is just 1 proton. So we call hydrogen a proton, which is positively charged. So what you do is that because the proton is positively charged, it is influenced by an electromagnetic force or a magnet. So what you do is that if you place a human being in an external magnetic field, MRI, what it does is that it disrupts the normal orientation of the protons. They reorient based on the alignment of the magnetic field because they're south and north pole. So what you do is you give a small pulse of radio frequency to disrupt the normal balance, and it has to rebalance itself. It then emits radiation again, and this radiation, which is still in the radio frequency range, is harnessed and is used in medicine to reconstruct the image because it contains the information about the function of that tissue that you are imaging. What I want to go here is the PET, then I'll talk about the SPECT. The PET is interesting because it confirms the Qur'anic verse that Allah created everything in pairs. So you have positron emission tomography. What happened is that we have matter and we have antimatter. The matter of the electron is what we know every day. The antimatter to the electron is the positron. So electron is negatively charged, but the positron is a positive electron. It's not proton. So what happens is that when you have a positron, it doesn't stay for long. So it has to find an electron and pair with it and actually annihilate, right? So if I would die and you are not married, you are possibly looking for a spouse. That's annihilation, actually. So when you have a positron radionuclide, it's injected into the body. It emits a positron. The positron look for an electron and annihilate. They form a back-to-back gamma ray. The rest mass of an electron is 511 keV. Don't worry about the energy, it's 511. The two of them has to give you about 1.022 keV. The energy of the gamma ray should be 511, 511. They have to be back-to-back for momentum conservation. Don't worry about that. And charge conservation. But what happens is that you have detectors around the PET scan. And they have to detect these gamma rays simultaneously because if there are two gamma rays coming at the same time, they have to be detected at the same time because they travel at the speed of light. And this information is used to reconstruct the image of a tumor. And the PET has the specialties that is able to tell you the function of the tumor, how aggressive the tumor is. And with the SPECT uses, unlike the PET, which uses two gamma rays, the SPECT uses a single gamma ray emitter. So what is that it's still a radionuclide. You inject into the body, but it will decay naturally and emit a gamma ray. The gamma ray is detected by something called a gamma camera, but again, it's a gamma detector. And it brings the information of the location of the radionuclide. And this can again be reconstructed into an image for diagnosis. Now, I've talked a lot about the diagnosis because you have to, in radiation oncology, you have to know that, first of all, can we see the cancer? Second, of course, can we understand it? And now, can we treat it? How do we treat it? That's where you have to use radiation therapy. And I explained how X-rays are produced. X-rays can be produced in a range of energies. So we have soft X-rays, we have hard X-rays. So we can produce X-ray for diagnostic imaging, which of course will use low energies. We can increase the energy of an X-ray by increasing the acceleration energy of the electrons that hit a target. So they produce more energy because some of them interact with the electrons in the atomic shell. Others go to interact with the field of the nucleus. And the field of the nucleus is positive. So it tries to slow down the negative electron charges. So there's a continuous loss of energy, which we call Bremsstrahlung. And all these energies are used and harnessed well at moderate measurement to treat cancer. Another popular and advanced technology is what we call the proton therapy. So the proton therapy is using protons. So you accelerate a proton, but this time around, you're not producing X-ray. What you do is that the proton has something you call the Bragg peak. When you accelerate a proton, it loses energy slowly, and at some point, it loses all of its energy at once, which means that the proton spare most of the normal tissues and focus much on the tumor if the target is right. Because in all this radiation therapy, you are treating the tumor as well as the cancer, but you want to be as localized as possible to treat the tumor away and sparing the normal tissue. That's why you have to even give the radiation in doses so that the normal cells have time to repair while the tumor, are dying continuously. So what happens is that when protons are charged particles like electrons, but they are positively charged and they are heavier than electrons. So once you accelerate them, because they are heavier, they travel slowly as compared to an electron because of momentum effect. So as they travel through the tissue, they will lose energy slowly, but if your target is right, within the shortest time, they, release all its energy. And it's very good in tumor therapy. And I think it's been classified one of the safest, if not the safest, in radiation oncology. And this would be my last slide. So I just wanted to let you know that neutron therapy is coming up. But the thing about neutron is that it has no charge. So when it enters the bodies, it's just going to the nucleus itself. And neutron-nucleus interaction can lead to the disintegration of the nucleus as well, which can lead to a lot of damage, which can have more effect on the tissue as compared to proton and X-rays, because we can handle them because we know how to do that. So, but the takeaway home here is that in my first slide, I said, oh Lord, increase me knowledge. I didn't mention that because I wanted to get the journey first. In the beginning, scientists were not studying the atom to cure cancer. It was to ponder over the creation of Allah. But in that pondering, we're able to invent technologies that are applied and used for the betterment of mankind. So if, as scientists, I'll quote one sentence, I don't remember his name, but he says that the things we see in science are not because that's what we are looking for, because they are possible to be seen. So if you're doing science, do a good science and ponder over the creation of Allah Almighty. You should have good intention. And inshallah, we can always save mankind. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah. Our final speaker of this session is Dr. Danial Ahmad. Dr. Danial Ahmad is an associate research scientist in cardiac surgery at the Yale School of Medicine. Previously, he worked in cardiovascular research at the University of Pittsburgh and Thomas Jefferson University. Dr. Danial also had the honor of working at Tahira Heart Institute. His research focuses on clinical outcomes in cardiac surgery and cardiology, with the goal of finding ways to improve outcomes for patients suffering from heart disease.
Jazakallah for that kind introduction. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. We're just getting the final PowerPoint loaded. We'll be with you shortly.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh once again. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be at this August convention, and I thank the organizers very much for giving me this opportunity. When I was researching this topic, it's a bit tricky to navigate this topic as it has a lot of spiritual connotations and physical connotations as well, but I thought I'd try and make it as simple as possible for myself. So we'll break this down into three parts. There's the heart part, there's the hardened part, and then there's the guidance part, which we'll touch upon very briefly at the very end. In the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala uses three words to describe the heart. Qalb, the ever-changing or turning heart. Fuad, the inflamed or the emotional heart. And then Sadr, the chest or the core. One example of this is in Surah chapter 22, verse 47, where Allah the Almighty says, "Have they not traveled in the land so that they may have hearts wherewith to understand, or ears wherewith to hear? But the fact is that it is not the eyes that are blind, but it is the hearts which are in the breasts that are blind." In this verse, Allah Ta'ala uses two words, qalb and sadr, to describe the heart. There's a very famous portion of a hadith of the Holy Prophet ﷺ that also uses one of these words, qalb, and I will read part of it. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says, "Beware, in the body there's a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the whole body is sound, and if it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. And hearken, it is the heart." On surface examination of this hadith, this is alluding to the physical aspects of the heart and heart disease and how it affects the whole body. Since the same words are seen in the Quran, it begs the question, is there more to this than meets the eye? Is the heart just a pump, or is there more to it? I will not attempt to answer this question. I will present what I found in my research, and everyone is free to draw their own conclusions from this. So touching on the heart aspect of this, we are acutely aware of how pervasive heart disease is in the US. These are some facts that you can see on your screen from the CDC. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men, women, and people of almost all racial ethnic groups. Almost every minute you have 2 people dying from heart disease. The most common type of heart disease is coronary heart disease, which involves the blood vessels on the surface of the heart, and almost every 40 seconds you have somebody who's suffering from a heart attack. Heart disease can be looked at from different lenses. If you look at the heart as a structure, you can break down the different parts, and diseases that affect each part are a whole wide field of study. So for example, heart valve disease, there are diseases of heart failure, essentially where the heart fails to pump enough. There are diseases of the heart muscle, diseases of the conduction system in the heart, and of course, diseases that affect the blood supply of the heart itself. And this is the most common type of heart disease, otherwise known as coronary heart disease. I've had the opportunity to work in research in heart valve disease and heart failure and some coronary artery disease as well. The promised Messiah, ﷺ, I found a passage from the writings of the promised Messiah, ﷺ, which addresses the spiritual aspect of this, but I would urge everybody to look at the original source of this and read the original text to get the full context. I used 3 AI models to attempt translating the original writing of the promised Messiah, ﷺ, and I chose the one that I thought was the closest, not the best. So please, if you bear with me, I will read this. "Hundreds of hidden mysteries are revealed to those endowed with spiritual insight and those who receive divine communication. and thousands of experiential proofs bear witness to this, yet philosophers continue to deny them. Just as philosophers place the entire basis of perceiving rational truths, deliberation, and reflection in the brain, the people of spiritual insight have discovered through their authentic visions and spiritual experiences that the true source of human intellect and knowledge is the heart. As I myself have been observing for 35 years, God's inspiration, this is the rough translation of ilham, which is a treasury of spiritual gnosis. I learned this word myself for the first time. It's the closest translation of the word marfat. Spiritual gnosis and hidden sciences descends upon the heart alone. Often, the heart's nature as a fountainhead of knowledge is made manifest through a sound that strikes it with such force as if a bucket is thrown powerfully into a well that is full of water. Then the water of the heart surges upward in the form of a closed bud, and as it draws near the brain, it opens like a flower, and from within it, a word is born. That is the word of God. Thus, it is established from these authentic spiritual experiences that the brain has no direct connection to knowledge and gnosis. However, if the brain is sound and free from any affliction, it benefits from the hidden sciences of the heart. And since the brain is the origin of the nerve, it is like a pulley that can draw water from a well, while the heart is that well, which is the source of hidden sciences. This is the secret that people of truth have come to know through authentic spiritual unveilings, and I myself am one who has personally experienced this. There's a small footnote at the end. Prophet ﷺ says, since the brain is the origin of the nerves, it is its function to perceive the knowledge of the heart, and if any affliction occurs in the brain, those sciences become veiled, just as if the bucket or the rope is defective, water cannot be drawn from the well. Current science is trying to keep pace with truths that have been revealed to our spiritual leaders. There's a term that you might have heard at some point called the heart-brain axis. This is essentially a two-way communication between the brain and the heart, which modulates emotion, cognition, and physiology as well. There are three aspects of this. There's the neural pathway, there is the biochemical pathway, and then there is the mechanical pathway. The mechanical pathway is the easiest to understand. The heart is a pump. There's a force that's associated with that pumping action, or a pulse that is created, and then that travels across the blood vessels, through the blood vessels to the brain as well. And then there are receptors, pressure receptors, and other receptors that sense this. That's one way of communication. Another way of communication is through nerves, or the nervous system, the central nervous system. And there's the biochemical aspect of this as well, which is essentially communication through hormones or neuropeptides that are released from the heart and from the brain, and they communicate bidirectionally with each other. The image on the right is actually, in my opinion, is a depiction of the hadith that I read to you earlier, where you can see the central role of the heart in controlling the physiology of the whole body. The heart-brain axis, this chart also shows, or it indicates that even when cardiovascular disease has not reached a symptomatic stage, its effects can be felt in brain health through hypoperfusion, or when the brain is not receiving its adequate blood supply. You might see some changes in small vessels of the brain. There is a group of cells and nerves and cellular network that comes together in the heart, or otherwise referred to as the intracardiac nervous system, that comprises cells called the glial cells and neurons that are located in specific areas, specific functions. We've known about these cells for the past few decades, but their functions are being unveiled more recently. Their functions in communication between the heart and brain, their functions in neuromodulation, their functions in regeneration of after disease or damage. Now onto the hardened aspect, and I will touch on this very briefly. Hardened or sealed heart is a terminology that at least I found only in the Quran. And I'll just give you a few examples of this. I think it describes, and there are experts here who can correct me if I'm wrong, it describes a state of apathy or indifference that results from persistence in doing wrong. So in the Holy Quran, Allah Ta'ala says in chapter 6, verse 44, "Why then, when our punishment came upon them, they did not grow humble, but their hearts were hardened, and Satan made all that they did seem fair to them." In the verse below, Surah chapter 5, verse 14, Allah says, "So because of breaking their covenant, we have cursed them and have hardened their hearts. They pervert the words from their proper places and have forgotten a good part of that which they were exhorted. And thou wilt not cease to discover treachery on their part, except in a few of them. So pardon them and turn away from them. Surely Allah loves those who do good." And there are a few more examples presented here. I will not read all of them. So these are examples of hardened hearts. Now, when I read these verses and tried to ponder over them, I saw a sequence. There was a cause that led to the effect, which is the hardened heart. So it follows logically, and I may be wrong, that if you have a cause and effect, a bad effect that you don't want, you change the cause or do the opposite of that. So for example, in the first situation, Allah Ta'ala says, the punishment came to certain people, they did not grow humble, their hearts were hardened. So antidote to that should be humility, in my opinion. In the other verse, breaking their covenant, so keep your covenants, keep your oaths. Pervert words from their proper places, don't do that. Follow the teachings that you've been given and implement them as best as possible. And do not be treacherous, be loyal. These are some of the lessons I personally got from these verses. So, a bit on the guidance aspect, I'm wholly unqualified for this, but I think prevention is the best cure in the physical and the spiritual worlds. So in the spiritual aspect, like I just mentioned, these traits that have, the lack of the traits led to hardening of hearts. So having these traits should not lead to hardening of hearts, if that makes sense. On the left side is a picture almost all of us have seen at one point or another relating to prevention of heart disease, things we can do in our physical life to prevent heart disease, exercising, having a good diet, not smoking, and others. So the bottom line of this is hopeful prevention is the best cure. And I would leave you with one last short video clip from our beloved Imam. A very dear friend and colleague of mine had the opportunity to ask Huzur a very pertinent question, a question that's pertinent to this talk earlier this year. Dr. Ibazamid is that colleague of mine, and I'll just play the clip and you can. Do you have sound?
रिसर्च क्लिनिकल आउटकम्स में और ट्रांसलेशनल रिसर्च उसमें पिग्स पे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करते हैं उसके ताल्लुक से एक सवाल था कि मेरा इंटरेस्ट हार्ट ब्रेन एक्सिस में है जो कनेक्शन होता है कि इंसान के थॉट्स हार्ट अपने बारे में उसकी क्या गाइडेंस है जो रूहानियत के तजुर्बा रखने वाले हैं.
I think we'll stop here because it's not working properly. This reminds us that
मुस्लिमों ने इसकी एक दलील ये भी दी हुई है कि हार्ट जो है ब्लड सप्लाई कर रहा होता है और ब्लड सर्कुलेशन करके ब्रेन को भी जाता है और बाकी जिस्म में भी जाता है और ब्लड का भी एक रोल है ये मैसेज पहुंचाने में. इसलिए ये कहा जा सकता है कि दिल से दिमाग में जाती बात और फिर आगे
मेरी research clinical outcomes में और translational research उसमें pigs पे experiments करते हैं उस पे उसके ताल्लुक से एक
The last message of Huzur was do more research and excel spiritually. That's the take-home message from this. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. So this reminds us that man and machine will always fail us, and that we should build a relationship with Allah. And that is the relationship that will truly help you. So we should work on that as much as possible. So that brings us to the close of this session, and we'll have a couple of announcements. But we've been talking about science here on Earth and other discoveries. What about things up there in space? So we are lucky to have as one of my moderators a space scientist, Dr. Mujeeb Malik, and he's going to say a few things in a couple of minutes.
Assalamu alaikum. So the theme of this session and the one in the morning was Qur'anic wisdom and the discoveries of our time. Most of the talks, excellent talks, were related to medical sciences, which is not my field. I'm a NASA scientist. So the question arises, NASA had recently a very successful launch of Artemis 2, which has 4 astronauts that went around the moon and came back. So the question arises in the context of Quran and science, is there any hint in Quran about space travel? So earlier in the session, Surah Ar-Rahman was recited, first 14 verses. If we go to the 34th verse of that surah, we read, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Ya mashar al-jinni wal-insi in istatatum an tanfuzu min aqtaris samawati wal-arz fanfuzu la tanfuzuna illa bi-sultan wa bi-ayyi alai rabbikuma tukazziban. Which means that, it's my translation, that O group of jinns and people, if you think that you have the power to escape the confines or the boundaries of this earth and heavens, then try it. You will not be able to. Illa bi sultan, except if you bring in an argument. So basically, have authority to do that, then you can. So what is this illa bi sultan? That is the basic foundation of all this that has been talked about. That is to study the creation of Allah and learn from that. If you follow what was created by Allah, then you will be able to do things that you cannot do right now. That's the discovery. And that's true for all the medical sciences. That's true for space travel also. So at least escape from the earth, if you took as the boundary of the earth as the atmosphere, to escape from the earth, it's all Newtonian physics, not quantum physics or nuclear physics. And Newton was 300 centuries ago, but it takes time to build up actually technologies, develop and new ideas. So all this space travel is related based on Newtonian physics. And I think that everywhere the message is that become ulul albab, that meaning that it was recited in the first session this morning, that you be the people of intellect and deep understanding. If you study the nature, complex systems, you will learn and you will advance what God has created. And it's a never-ending field because the creation is limitless. We can escape the earth, we know, have demonstrated that, but can we escape the Hammond, which is, there are so many solar systems, but at least we can escape we have been able to escape the Earth atmosphere. So with that, I would just stop. I mentioned to the young lady who spoke about Dr. Salam, I want to mention also that Salam was also the founder of Pakistan's space program. The agency, the SPARCO, was created by Dr. Salam, and this was under actually NASA's Apollo program that they had launched rockets. This was in early 1960s. So with that, that's it. Thank
you. Jazakallah, Dr. Malik, that was fascinating. And thank you for a great session. We are going to start a brief panel discussion before lunch, which will be between 12:30 and 1:30, followed by Zohar and Nasir prayers at 1:30. So, sisters, if you have any questions on your side, we can begin over there.
Yes, we have one question.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question from Dr. Nusrat Sharif Saiba. Amazing talk on T regulatory cells and the immunology and immune system. As we know, the expressions of disturbed immune system can cause so many diseases like Alzheimer, asthma, eczema, IBS, and diabetes. And I just had a question that is there any new treatment modality came out for to promote the function of T regulatory cells?
Jazakallah, that's a great question. So there are several new modalities, and the emerging trend is that we want to have a treatment that doesn't cause broad immunosuppression, but just targets the key target cells for disease. And the T regulatory cells is one where we have agonists or antigen-specific agonists that will booster the T regulatory cells in the body so that they can restore the balance. That's one approach that is either just through antigen-specific, bispecific antibodies which create agonism and restore the response. And moreover, there is also CAR T therapy where CAR Ts are the T regulatory cells taken out from the patient, and then they are expanded in vitro and made into CAR T cells that can then be re-injected and prolong patients' lives. But that is also a little bit cumbersome. So we are more moving towards tolerance-inducing therapies, which is the bispecific antigen-specific therapies, which are coming up rapidly in the field to restore peripheral tolerance. And besides that, I think the field is also moving in depleting strategies, particularly in lupus. There are several therapies for depleting B cells, which are the antibody-producing cells. And they are special bispecific antibodies, one arm of which binds the T cells and one binds to the B cells so that they destroy the targeting B cell from the body. And those kind of therapies are moving into the clinic, so they can put the patient in remission for at least a year. So that's the most advanced. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.
We have one more question on the ladies' side, please.
This question is for Dr. Shah and Dr. Sharif, and it is related to the concept of mizan and the question about finding inconsistencies in the creation. So will you consider the genetic defects, like one that causes thalassemia or autoimmune diseases, as inconsistencies, and if not, why?
Jazakallah. So with regard to autoimmunity, it's not an inconsistency. If you can say that a normal response is present, but there are conditions when a normal response could be dysregulated, right? So it depends on how you think of it as an inconsistency. In nature, several things are responsible that the life is not finite. So the immune system also needs to function. Everyone will not have a stable immune system all the time. So it goes through changes. So whenever there is a dysregulation, then it is alarming, definitely. And it is something that in the universal law of principle from the creation, you don't see in the celestial bodies created by Almighty Allah, but human beings are finite, and so they do reflect the concept of the balance, but then life has a finite purpose. So at some point, you're going to suffer from disease, you're going to fall sick, and you're ultimately going to die. And so with that concept, autoimmunity is one, and where the immune system is dysregulated. And with that same concept, people get cancer, right? And that same immune system in that becomes too immunosuppressive. So the T regulatory cells actually are overperforming their suppressive function, and so that the cancer evades the immune system. So basically, I think either extremes, if you're thinking in terms of principle, they are not consistent behaviors. But those inconsistencies are natural and do happen in life. Yeah.
Jazakallah. We'll pass it on to Dr. Shah, and we have exactly 3 minutes to close this session.
Assalamu alaikum. We have one question on the men's side.
Assalamu alaikum. I had a question for Danial Ahmad Sahib. That I think Huzur had answered a question about pig to heart human transplant, and that it is permissible. Though I wasn't clear really on, there's different aspects of permissibility. Maybe it's permissible, but then it's a choice, or maybe if a person can save their life, then they must, and to forego that transplant would be wrong. But I was just wondering, based on the research, if a person is to receive a pig heart as a transplant, then to what extent would it have an effect on their emotions, and then perhaps it can be inferred effects on spirituality. But from the quotes of Masih Maud and also some of the points shared on the effect of the heart on a person's personality and being, so to what extent would that affect that individual who receives that transplant?
Jazakallah for that very easy question. I'm not an expert on the medical word for this is xenotransplantation, transplantation from animals to humans. And I'm aware of a very recent case. It was just one or two very recently. It was somewhat successful, lasted for weeks. That was here in Maryland, done by Dr. Bart Griffith, where they transplanted a heart from I think an ape to human, if I'm not mistaken. We're still way off reaching that stage where a whole organ from an animal is transplanted into human. However, we do have smaller versions of this where we use pig heart valves. When we have a defective heart valve, we change those and implant a pig's heart valve. I'm not aware of any research that's been done to assess the non-medical aspects of this, and that's probably something we can take up upon ourselves. But as far as I know, there are no known spiritual effects or non-physical effects of that. The valves function pretty much well. We use them at Tahira Heart Institute as well. I guess, I don't know if that answers the question.
Jazakallah. Okay, with that, we will conclude this session. We wanted to thank everyone for their time, attention, and enthusiasm. After lunch and Salat, we will be meeting back in Salon 1 and 2 for the third.